that locking people up for the sake of it was a waste of public funds. But what's the alternative way to punish and deter crime? It's time to get out the handcuffs and the whips, as this week we put crime in the spotlight. The Conservative government of the 1990s had one message on crime.
Prison works. It ensures that we are protected from murderers, muggers and rapists, and it makes many who are tempted to commit crime think twice.
Then came New Labour's slogan, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. It was meant to focus on prevention as much as punishment, but the prison population continued to soar. It's now doubled since Ken Clarke was Home Secretary in the 90s, and he now says that incarceration isn't working.
Too often, prison has proved a costly and ineffectual approach that fails to turn criminals into law-abiding citizens. Indeed, in all our experience in the worst prisons, it produces tougher criminals.
But during the election campaign, the Tories sent a rather different message.
When someone smashes up the bus stop, when someone repeatedly breaks the law, when someone's found fighting on a Friday or Saturday night, as a magistrate, you've got to have that power for a short prison sentence.
So is it about cutting crime or cutting the money spent on prisons? And will fewer criminals behind bars lead to more crime and more fear of crime on the streets?
Every time I write a rhyme, these people think it's a crime to tell them what's on my mind.
And we're joined now by my co-presenter on CBBC, aren't you?
Yes.
Angelica.
We did a good show, didn't we?
We did a good show. Yes. Grilling the kids, grilling all the politicians during the campaign. Let me ask you this. How easy is it, in your view, for people to drift into crime, even unintentionally?
I think I'm going to start off with my own experiences. I grew up in a single-parent family. We didn't have any money, and I'm an ethnic minority, so the odds are against me. But I was lucky enough to grow up in Ealing, and in London, Ealing's pretty safe and lucky. But even my sister, she mixed with the wrong crowds and had a few problems with the police and stuff. So it's easy as that. So I think it's about socialisation, who you meet along the way. But then it's so easy, isn't it? Whatever level you're at, young, old, working or not, you go into a shop. If you can get away with not paying for something, you know, people get a bit of a buzz.
And it's
you
just there.
Yeah, try it once, think you can get away with it.
Is not obviously not something that like shoplifting or kids, but it is prison a deterrent?
I think prison should be a deterrent. I mean, there was this myth, and I was growing up saying, oh, in prison you've got Sky TV, you get a bed, you know, you get 3 meals a day. I didn't get 3 meals a day brought to me, and it was almost a joke, thinking, oh, maybe we should go to prison, you know, we'd get a better life. But we don't have the death penalty here, so I think prison needs to be a deterrent. But they're saying that the figures have doubled for people going into prison over the last 20 years. So what's that saying? If, you know, maybe it's not a deterrent. Maybe we need to look at how strict it is or what happens there.
Well, number of people going into prison has doubled since Ken Clarke was last Home Secretary. And by the two main standards of judging crime in this country, crime has gone down. So Michael Howard was right. Prison works.
Well, on the narrow point that Michael Howard made, that a person who has committed a rape or a burglary or whatever while he's in prison is not going to do that again, that is obviously the case. I think most people also believe in rehabilitation. And the question really is, how strong is the point that Ken Clarke is making? Because, you know, most people who commit crime are young males. And that tells us straight away that most people commit crime at a time in their life and then at a time in their life cease committing it. So these are people who, you know, get involved in disorderly conduct or a bit of shoplifting or whatever. Now, I think by now most of us know that these are not people you should be sending to prison if you can possibly help it.
But they're not.
And they're not going to prison, that's the point. And so, unfortunately, for Ken's point, there are only 7,000 people in prison, as I understand it, who are doing a sentence of a year or less. And these are presumably the people you're talking about who would be capable of rehabilitation. So it may be quite a small point. It may not be really a very big point at all.
But there's a strange lack of democratic legitimacy here. The Conservatives had in their manifesto that they were going to increase prison capacity. In other words, have more prisons. And then 6 weeks later, Mr. Clarke turns around and says, well, I never really believed in prison in the first place.
It was a bit of kind of pattern here, isn't there? We were talking about other things before that nobody really voted for, and the coalition, I think they can rip up everything. But you know, we had the "My Mother is a Magistrate" speech, didn't we, from David Cameron, and that was pretty clear, wasn't it? What he was saying.
Well, the implication was the opposite of what Ken Clarke said.
And you wonder, don't you, whether this U-turn has been driven by money or by principle. But to be honest, I actually don't want to dismiss what Ken Clarke was saying or what Angelica was saying. I think it's actually a very important point. I received a report as Health Secretary from Lord Bradley, and he reported on mental health in the prison system. And there is obviously a lot of young people who end up in the prison, in the criminal justice system, who have undiagnosed or untreated mental health problems. And that actually is a bit of a kind of a scar on our society.
What do you make of this current debate between the politicians, though, on prison? One, we're promised more prisons and we're going to put more bad guys away. You get in power and you completely change your mind.
I think the whole thing about the coalition and the parties changing their mind on their policies is quite disheartening for me, because when you vote for a party at an election, you expect to get what they say. You expect to get what they put in.
What we got elected for.
And also what's in their manifesto. And they haven't put that in their manifesto about now, you know, cutting custodial sentences. And you're like, OK, so what's happening? Change of rhetoric, change of policy, mid-term. What else is going to change along the way?
Mark my words, they're in love with paradox. Everybody's enjoying doing something which they weren't expected to do.
It's like having to deal with Nietzsche late at night. No, sadly, Nietzsche couldn't be with us tonight, but you could.
Oh,
it's good to see you. Thank you. That's your lot for tonight, folks. I'm off to Annabelle's to see if I can